Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Plotlines. I'm your host, Connor, and today we're continuing our movie discussion series. And the movie we will be covering today is The Emperor's Club. And with me to discuss it, because he suggested it, I did not know this movie existed until he brought it into my life. The Supreme Pontiff himself, Jeff. Welcome back to the show.
Hi, Connor. Thanks. Really appreciate you having me on and taking this suggestion because, like I've mentioned a few times to you, this is one of my top five favorite movies. Every time I go back to it, I just get more from it and notice new things. So I really appreciate you taking the suggestion and giving me the opportunity and excuse to watch it again.
Well, I'm glad I can give you that opportunity. Uh, you know, we watched and discussed the Dead
Dead
Poet
Poets.
Society previously, and this is its spiritual antagonist, it
Mhm.
seems. And I'm glad we're discussing both of them back to back. So, which one did you watch first?
Definitely the Dead Poet Society, classic. Watched that in high school English, and then later in high school, I was introduced to the Emperor's Club, and at the time, I liked both of them, but um, now my feelings have changed about one and stayed the same about the other.
Yeah, how did you come across it in high school?
So I remember um, earlier before it was coming out, I'd seen some of the previews. I showed the baseball scene, and I thought it was, kind of interesting. So one time, just saw it at Blockbuster and decided to give it a shot.
Okay, so the Dead Poet Society was from school, and this one is from outside.
Yep.
Okay, that's interesting. In some sense, the Emperor's Club in of itself isn't, I don't think, the most, uh, I don't know, um, controversial. Like, it's not really I don't think it would be a controversial movie necessarily,
Hmm.
but it's more of it's a positive view than a negative one, which comes through Dead Poet Society. And in this movie, also the main character is the professor. Is the teacher. We had Keating as from the Dead Poet Society, who is more like a supporting member of the cast, who is really influencing the boys, but but he doesn't have as much agency. Uh, he's not pushing the plot forward by his actions outside of class. Like, the kids are taking what they see in class, and you're getting it from their perspective. While in this movie, Kevin Kline, who's the teacher, is the heart and the main character.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're doing the comparing and contrasting next time, but
Mhm.
it's definitely, yeah, you're right on the money there. We can talk about this more next time, but I think Keating is kind of like the spark that then it gets flame or fanned into a flame, and he has no control over it. Whereas Kevin Kline is more like a sculptor who's consistently trying to mold his students. So he's much more proactive and guiding than just inspiring and leading them nowhere.
Yes, exactly. So the setting is the 1970s at a boarding school for very wealthy families, and Kevin Kline plays William Hundert, a classics teacher. So he is basically teaching Greek and Roman history,
Hmm.
and a little bit of philosophy too. But
Yep.
that's because of the history, not necessarily the main topic of the class.
Yeah, well, if you look at the classics, so many of the great men were the philosophers, which is not the situation we have today. We have the political leaders and then we have the philosophers. But Cicero, Caesar, Augustus, like these were all men who thought deeply in addition to leading. And so to grapple with, the classics in general is to grapple not just with great thinkers, but great men of history.
Yeah, Alexander is one of those as well. Uh, but the it, I mean, he's comparing in some ways without like mentioning, people of our time period necessarily, but you can easily do this while watching it. Sort of compare the leaders of our society to the leaders of Greek and Roman society and what they tried to present to the world and what they were pursuing and what they at least what they actively sought for was virtue.
Yeah, the question that was asked for virtue never used to be, "What do you do in this situation?" Like, it wasn't situational, it wasn't based on consequences. The question of ethics originally was, "What is the best life to lead?" And the answer that was most commonly accepted, at least by the great men, was the virtuous life. And obviously, there were some others like the hedonists and the Epicureans and the Stoics that chose different things. But the one that we've seen come through, especially via Plato, Aristotle, and then Aquinas, was that the virtuous life is the life that is best to lead. Even if others consider you to be unvirtuous, it's still a better life to lead than to be unvirtuous and have people think you're virtuous.
What was the difference between the Stoics and those pursuing the virtuous life?
So the Stoics were focused on being completely removed from emotion, essentially. So, like, whether something good happens to you or bad happens to you, okay, that happened. I'm going to keep going on with my life. Like, it's almost becoming an automaton, just not being affected by perceived good and bad, but just being purely rational, essentially.
And that
And
was Marcus Aurelius, right?
yes, he was the last greatest Stoic. The original Stoics were in Greece as well, but the difference is with virtue, you have the classical view of man where it's the intellect, the will, and the passions. And the passions do have a purpose. You should be informed by your passions, just not controlled by them. The Stoics said you shouldn't be informed by your passions at all. You should just cut those out, essentially.
Yeah. We get sort of a look at the life of the teacher, uh, Kevin Kline's character at this school, and he seems very, confident, very, set in his ways. He's very much a towering figure
Hmm.
uh, in the society that he's a part of, and he basically is putting the students that he has in line. He's which literally he is. He comes across Jesse Eisenberg's character,
Hmm.
which is really kind of funny. It's probably one of Jesse Eisenberg's first movies. It's his third. It's his third movie that he did, and he basically uh, tells Jesse Eisenberg's character to stay on the path instead of sort of chaotically walking in the grass at the
Hmm.
school. And this is mostly symbolic, I would say. Like, is it really that important that Jesse Eisenberg's character stays on the path versus the grass? Not necessarily, but what does it symbolize? Symbolizes him staying on the virtuous path.
Yep, and that is what virtue ethics is being faithful in small things. You can then be trusted with greater things. And I love just the little back and forth when Mr. Hundred catches him and tells him to stay on the path, and Eisenberg's character is like, "Oh yeah, it's better for the grass." And he just turns to him, "It is better for you." Like,
Yeah.
it seems like every interaction that he has with these students, he's trying to convey something and help shape them in some way.
Also, Eisenberg still has that same, like, I don't know, acting type
Mhm.
even back then. that he does now, where he's sort of this what's the word, like
Squirrely.
nerdy, but like indecisive person who's
Mm,
like you know hard to get things out. He repeats himself. He's sort of umming and stuff like that.
yeah.
Eh,
Yeah, I think that, he very much does have a type for his character, like, or for the characters that he plays.
well, it's just crazy because he's so young in this too. Um,
Yeah.
like he's already gotten his sort of shtick uh, right away.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good point. I didn't think about it that way, but, like, you even see it come through when he was trying to play Lex Luthor, like, he can't be actually intimidating.
But yeah, he's 19 in this movie too.
Oh, dang, and, he plays, I think it's a 15 or a 16-year-old quite well.
Yeah, they look a lot like the kids in this movie look a lot more like kids than the ones in Dead Poet Society.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that.
I don't know what it is about them necessarily, but they just seem more innocent, and they act more innocent to some degree.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So
think that that's a very fair point, and part of that is, again, where you see the agency. The agency is with the teacher rather than with the students, empowering them to make their own decisions. No, you need to, like, be challenged and then meet expectations.
you need to help them make the decisions.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's like the students need to be challenged and then, like, yeah, you help them get there, but you're setting the standard for them.
Yeah, and he sets them up to basically uh, attempt to do good things and to pursue virtue. And one of the ways he does that is he talks about this uh, king that basically nobody remembers.
Yep, Shatrukna Hunte.
Yeah, Shudrik Nahunte. Was a conqueror, but like he didn't really achieve anything, and that's why he's not remembered.
Yeah, that was the very first thing that he does for anyone who hasn't seen the movie is he has one of the students who I think is actually truly the foil to the troublemaking student that is to come. But
Mhm.
Martin Blythe, he has him stand up and read, all these accomplishments of his conquests and what he had stolen, and then he asks the class like, "Hey, uh, we're going to do a quick open discussion about that. Books are allowed, but you won't find him there because, and what was it that he said exactly? It's um, conquest without contribution is without significance. And just from the get go, he is trying to get the students to understand it's not just about how others see you, it's about what you are actually contributing to society.
And it's not entirely about ends either.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, because that was the very first quote that I wrote down is a man's character is his fate.
exactly. And we're introduced to another student who is basically entering into the school late. He's the son of a West Virginia senator. His name is Bell, and that's his last name. And also the names. I just want to say the names of the characters are very like maybe like old school, like classic, not like just very odd names, I guess, that eccentric people might pick.
Yeah, I would agree because his name is Sedgwick Bell.
Yes, Sedgwick. So at least he is. Some of them
Mhm.
are not. I guess Martin Lewis, like they're not. The others aren't, but they are much more sort of uh, highbrow names, I guess. A little more not regular names, I guess I should say,
Yeah, I think
because
that's fair. And you're right there. Like, this is from the upper echelon of
mhm.
society, the highest of the high class.
So they're basically, following the trends of the upper class. They're not following the, lowly peasantry's choices.
Yep.
Anyways, so we have this, the kid enters into the classroom and he's already a problem. He is
From the
basic
first moment.
Yeah, he already is disobedient.
Yep. When Mr. Hundert says, please sit down and points to his seat, he's like, no, I'm good. I'll take this one. And just everything he's doing. He also mocks them for wearing togas, saying, I thought this was an all boys school. Why are you wearing dresses? Like, he's from the moment he's there, he's trying to assert his will.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think Mr. Hundert does a very good job, uh, basically able to corral him. He doesn't do it in a very like I don't know what's the word, aggressive manner. He's very relaxed.
Yeah, he is, and you can kind of see the character art from the moment that Sedgwick gets in until he has his breakthrough. He's not in a mean or, like you said, aggressive way, but he is being broken down by Mr. Hundred, just kind of like how a horse gets broken. He's instilling discipline. He's breaking his will by not allowing him to just get away with whatever he wanted. He was making sure that if he set down a rule, Sedgwick had to follow it or he was going to suffer the consequences. And you can see through so many of the interactions that it's just that battle of wills, and Mr. Hundred never backs down.
Indeed, which is interesting because my thought process regarding his sort of background is that well, I mean, I'll ask you the question. Do you think he's uh rebellious because he doesn't get any attention or doesn't get any love from his senator father, or has he been just able to do whatever he wants all the time, or maybe it's a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. We definitely see later in the film that relationship with his father was a huge matter for him. And his father just never actually took the time to guide or mold him. He just disciplined. But he also, I think, really was just searching after, like, he was trying to be the cool kid, but he still wanted that companionship. So this was something I hadn't noticed before, but to me, it was really interesting that, again, so spoilers as you should expect for this, but um, before he has his breakthrough, you always see him when he's on his own. He's got his baseball and he's got his glove and he's just throwing it off of walls, and he's always playing by himself. He's never got anybody else. But after his breakthrough, you actually do see him, you have the great baseball scene. He's playing with everybody else. He actually starts to integrate rather than make himself seem distant and above everything.
And when he does make himself distant and above, he draws people to him, uh people who are basically vulnerable to corruption.
Yep.
And before that, before he begins corrupting people, one of the things that they do when he's sort of throwing the ball against the wall in his bedroom, the because this is a boarding school, they all live right by each
Mhm.
other. A bunch of the kids come and basically ask him to stop because they're
Mhm.
trying to study. Like they're actually pursuing the work that they're supposed to be pursuing, while he is just I think he's just trying to forget his life, kind of.
Yeah.
I think he doesn't see virtue in his father, so therefore he he's unhappy at home, and he doesn't want to be reminded of life, so therefore he's just going to slack forever, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and you also see, it's perhaps significant that he wasn't there for that first talk. Not that he would have really taken it to heart about Shutruk Nahunte, but the one of the next scenes that we see him actually in the class is they're reading through Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, and he's playing Brutus, the most noble of the Romans. And Brutus, right, so the scene that they're reading is critical, where they're talking about um, the plot to assassinate Caesar, and he's trying to tell them, no, we shouldn't also kill Mark Antony. Shakespeare's brilliant, but he's like, let us be executioners, not butchers. Right? Let Antony live. And you can tell that Sedgwick is just, he doesn't care what he's um, reading. And when Mr. Hundred questions him about it, he just says, well, I disagree with Brutus. And sorry to be crass, but this is just the quote. It's like, Brutus is a pussy. Like, he should have just killed him, because if he didn't, or because he didn't, Mark Antony ends up being in the second triumvirate with Augustus and ends up killing Pompey. So because Pompey was virtuous and chose or convinced others not to go all the way by also assassinating Mark Antony, it ends up coming back to bite him. So all he can see is the consequence. And when Hundred says, well, he wouldn't have, he never wanted to be emperor, and his response is, well, he would have won. That was Sedgwick's perspective on it. And just that alone, again, it's all about the consequences for Sedgwick. It's all about conquest. It isn't about contribution and doing things the right way.
Yeah, Sedgwick is basically providing us a utilitarian
Mm-hmm.
outlook on the situation, but when the means, are deadly, uh, not
Yeah.
just to the body but also to the soul,
Mm-hmm.
it should be a much greater choice, a much harder choice, and it should be actually considered, and not like Sedgwick doesn't consider it because he has no value of virtue. He doesn't value it.
Mm-hmm.
He values power because that's what he sees with his father.
Yeah, and part of you also just has to, or part of me thinks like he's also a teenage, punk that's trying to show bravado, but who knows? Like he probably wouldn't actually have the stomach to do that. Like to,
Yeah, well, I
like,
mean, he's a kid, but I of course I don't think he'd do it, but I don't think uh if he took the opposite position, if he was supportive of Brutus, like or if you had asked the same question to sort of Jesse Eisenberg's character,
mhm.
I don't, and he had a better response, I don't think he'd be able to do what Brutus did either.
Yeah,
So
yeah, I
like
think that's fair.
whether it be a good quote unquote uh um you know move or a bad move, it's still is going to be difficult for any teenager to actually uh, go through with it.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. But he's what he's doing is providing a foil to Mr. Hundred and what Mr. Hundred is trying to do. Like we just see this again where he's, trying to assert his will, because Hundred is trying to get people to look up to and see the virtue of Brutus. And he's just like, well, Brutus is a little punk. Like he needs to actually just grow a pair, essentially.
Hmm.
And it's after this that we start to see some more of the ways in which he's starting to poison the other students. Like one of the next scenes is when they steal a canoe and go out onto the lake to St. Mary's across the lake, and they try to start skinny dipping until nuns
Well,
come along and stop them.
yeah. Well, they also corrupt girls as well.
Yep.
Uh, but prior to that, I mean, starts with corrupting the boys' minds with
Hmm.
providing porn and um, uh, and basically Marxism.
Yeah, just in general, a distaste for authority. And that's where I liked that Martin Blythe of like so there were three other main students besides Sedgwick. One was Jesse Eisenberg's character, one was um, Deepak Mehta, an
Mhm.
Indian student, and then Martin Blythe. And the other two stay, but Martin Blythe, when the porn is pulled out, is like, I'm out of here. Like he just wanted nothing to do with it. And then
Mhm.
the next, or so like those are immediately following the Brutus scene are those two scenes. So again, like he's starting to gain some sway with the students. And right after that is when, at exactly like noon or whenever it was, everyone slammed their book shut while Hunter was writing out a graph on or a chart on the board. And of course, he kind of freaks out for a second, like he's startled and he jumps. And he knows immediately that it was Sedgwick. So he has Sedgwick come up and it's like, okay, I which or what emperors can you name? And he again tries to show bravado by in two successive ways of like saying, "Oh, I only know seven," and then lists the seven dwarves, and then says, "Oh, I only know four," and he lists the Beatles. And like he's getting laughter from the students, but then again, just calm as ever, Mr. Hundert says, "But can you name any of the emperors?" And he can't. And Hundred asks everyone else in the class to go chronologically, and they name like the first 15 emperors, while um, Sedgwick is just standing up there humiliated in front of his
Mhm.
class because he's refused to take any time to actually learn the material. It's just again one of those small ways that he's that Hundred isn't being aggressive, but he is slowly breaking Sedgwick's bravado down.
Well, and if Cedric hadn't just hadn't been kind of an ass about it, like if he hadn't just tried to uh pretend like he knew something like that, if he didn't name the seven dwarves from Snow White,
Hmm.
uh he wouldn't he wouldn't have been humiliated. I don't think that's what uh Hundert would have done.
Yeah, and what I think the most aggressive thing that he did was when he put the quote as like, youth will be grown, or lack of knowledge can be educated, but stupid lasts forever. Like he's really calling him out and laying it on thick there. And I think it's not only for Sedgwick's sake, but he's also making sure the other students don't fall too much under Sedgwick's sway.
Indeed. Let me see if I can find the full quote because I think it would be uh, really useful. Um, Hold on. No, I don't think I can find it. At least not
Oh,
quickly.
here,
Oh,
I've
you
got it.
have it?
It's
Good.
from Aristophanes. Youth ages, immaturity is outgrown. Ignorance can be educated and drunkenness sobered, but stupid lasts forever.
And the stupid, in some sense, isn't necessarily like a pure intellectual thing. The
Yeah, because he
stupid,
says ignorance can
yeah,
be educated.
yeah, exactly. So stupid means a way of life.
Hmm.
Stupid means how you act. A dumb person can act quite morally, quite
Hmm.
virtuously, and a smart person can do the same. But someone who is not outwardly trying to achieve good things is
Yep.
stupid
Yep.
in this circumstance.
So, um, yeah, I love that quote and the way that he delivers it, but he still hasn't broken through yet to Sedgwick, because the next we see is him handing a test back, and he says, "You got a 1 because you spelled your name correctly." Um, and like he knows at this point that nothing he can directly do is going to actually break Sedgwick. So he plays the trump card and says, "I've set up a meeting with your father to discuss your efforts."
Yeah.
And you can just see from that moment, like Sedgwick's like, "Oh shoot! Like now I'm actually gonna face some problems."
Wait, yeah, I'm not entirely sure how like how he thinks it's going to go. I think because it doesn't seem like his father takes that much of an interest in him.
Yeah, but he also knows that his father doesn't like to be disturbed.
Sure, so
So
it's a mix.
yeah, like I think that he knows he's gonna get an earful at least from his dad.
Yeah. But any practical change is very unlikely.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yes. But I will warn people that caution people that there are, we talked about sort of the porn and skinny dipping. There is some nudity in this. That's one of the disappointing elements of this movie to me.
Yeah,
Um,
so they don't when they're in the skinny dipping scene, they start to take off some clothes. There's no full nudity in there. And
well, the porn there is.
yeah, the porn you can kind of see something. So yeah, definitely it's a good point
eh,
to just look away for that.
Yeah, it's not the longest scenes or anything, but it's just unfortunate. It wasn't
Yeah.
necessary.
Yeah, you're
Um,
absolutely right there.
it's kind of odd to me that sort of Dead Poet Society, there's not that in that movie, but there is some of that in this, which I think might be more about the 80s versus the 2000s, maybe.
Yeah, and also potentially because it was you know, set in the 50s versus set in the 70s.
Yes, that's also true. A little more free uh anyways, and Cedric's character also, or Cedric, not he is the character.
Yeah.
He also has a David Bowie poster on his wall. He's just a general rebellious. He's bought into pretty much everything that could be rebellious.
Yeah.
And Hundert goes down to DC for the meeting,
Mm.
and it's clear by this meeting that the dad has zero interest in basically actually improving his son's character. He's only interested in information. Like he wants his son only to learn information in order to achieve things, not how what to do with that information or how to use that information, but just facts, just straight facts. And this is a common thing amongst um, people without any principles.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he starts off by just asking like, teaching them all these things, what's the good of it? And Mr. Hundert tries to explain that, he's giving them the examples of great civic virtue and trying to mold the students. And the dad just stops him dead, like, hold on now. Now you teach him his numbers and his dates and everything, but you don't mold my son, you educate him. I'll do the molding.
Yeah, which is interesting. I'm mold, like I'm not usually like I that last line isn't necessarily too terrible, though it's a poor understanding of what education is. Uh,
Hmm.
the father should be molding his son, but it's clear that the way he's molding him is uh basically
He's not.
uh well, no, I mean he is molding him, is he not? He's creating him into a second him, and that second him lacks any principles and lacks any virtue, and is just pursuing um things and good, um
Power.
power. Yeah, I mean one of the things he offers uh, uh Hundert is a Cuban cigar, which of
Yep.
course is illegal, and it would be illegal. It's illegal for him to have it. So
Yep.
he's not interested in following the path, so to speak.
Yeah, and he even tries to kind of buy him off with a gift from the revolver of the coachman for Robert E. Lee.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if that was simply buying off exactly, or
Or
if
just
he
I'm sorry, go ahead.
or if he's just that type of person who's just um he has so much stuff, or he has so much power that he likes showing off his power.
Yeah, it also could just be like he said that somebody had brought it in that morning. Maybe he just didn't care about it and was looking to pawn it off on somebody.
And this guy was, his history guy, so therefore
Yep.
he thinks he can pawn it off on him.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, he's a very pathetic dad. It's
Yep.
like he's not a good image of one. And he then calls his son on the phone and reads him sort of the riot act, but it's really about his money. It's about like I'm spending all this money to send you to school, you
My
know.
time is very valuable.
Exactly. So use it. Stop wasting my time, and
Yep.
especially by having somebody have to come up and talk to me about it.
Yep. And that's the moment when Sedgwick's bravado is finally broken. Like you can tell that he's just crushed by that time. And that's when Mr. Hundert finally is able to go in and actually have a chance to inspire him. Because he, at that point, goes into Sedgwick's room and gives him his own copy of the book and says, Mr. Julius Caesar's starting tomorrow. I highly recommend you read chapter 3. Like, and lets him know it's not just because I, he wants his class to do well. He's like, I believe in you. I believe you could be one of the top students in the class. And so at that darkest moment for Sedgwick, he has the person who has been, kind of battling against him and breaking him down little by little comes in and starts to build him up because that's what he needed at that point. And that's one of the things I appreciate about Mr. Hundert is that he's not always the same with his students. He's adapting to the challenges or the inspiration that they need at the different times.
And I think it shows to Sedgwick that Hunter isn't like his father. Like
Hmm.
he's not out to get him. He wants him to actually flourish, opposed to just not being in his way. Because if by breaking his bravado, maybe that makes him a more you know uh, quiet student, one that's not going to interrupt them anymore and get in the way of the class succeeding. But he's also interested in him actually succeeding in the class, and that's what he's showing by providing him the book.
Yeah, and the next day after the test, he brings his test over to him, and it's like, "Hey, you got a C." And Sedgwick's like, "Well, it's only a C." And I
I think it
love
was a C
just,
minus,
or yeah,
actually.
a C minus. But I just love the little back and forth of, well, you know what they say about Rome? It wasn't built in a day. No, all roads lead to it. It's like, I'm just kidding. You were right the first time. Like, he's actually joking with Sedgwick at that point and like encouraging him along.
Yeah, he's started sort of a camaraderie. He's started to actually have a relationship in which he can be a supportive teacher and
Hmm.
not just an antagonist for
Yeah.
Sedgwick. And yeah, so Sedgwick more or less uh, does a better job. He's pursuing the virtue, in the aspects of school at least. I don't think he's that far changed or anything. He's just more or less uh, actually trying. He's actually learning, and this competition eventually leads to there's sort of four people competing to it, competing for it. Jesse Eisenberg's character, the Indian kid, and
Martin Blythe.
Martin Blythe, and then Sedgwick has actually made it, to the top 4, and only the top 3 go on to a competition called the Mr. Julius Caesar, which is kind of weird. It's called the Emperor's Club, but Julius Caesar wasn't an emperor.
Yeah, that's fair, but there's nothing actually in the movie that talks about the Emperor's Club either.
Well, no, I think it is. I think the Emperor's Club are those who won the Mr. Julius Caesar.
Oh, I don't remember hearing that, but you certainly could be right.
Well, let me say, I don't know if they say that explicitly. I'm just saying that's what they're implying.
Okay.
I think
that's fair.
Which doesn't actually work, as I said, because Julius Caesar wasn't an emperor, though. It could have been the Mr. Augustus, or Mr. Anyways, there could have been a different name for that, but I don't know why. If that was an oversight, that wasn't it's based on a novel, but that's not the name.
No.
The Emperor's Club was not the name of the novel, so I don't know about that.
I didn't know that. I'll have to go look that up.
Yeah, it's let me check. The movie is based on The Palace Thief. It's a short story.
Oh, interesting.
By Ethan Cannon, or Canine.
Okay.
Whatever. Anyways, he's had 4 movies about his books, which is interesting.
Yeah, that is. So really quick, it shows a nice montage of, like you said, Sedgwick actually applying himself. He starts to study a bit with the guys. That's when you have the baseball scene, and he challenges Mr. Hundert to, see if he can actually get a hit off of him. Mr. Hundert then smashes the ball and ends up breaking the headmaster's car window. And you see them running around like they're actually having a bit of fun, Sedgwick, or with the other students and with Mr. Hundert as well. And you even see him vouching for Sedgwick for borrowing a book from the library that he's not supposed to be able to.
What do you think about the fact that Mr. Hundert runs after hitting the ball? Like it takes him a bit, but he runs and joins the students in sort of hiding from the headmaster.
I think that honestly, what you see a little bit is, like, to me, he gets a little bit corrupted by Sedgwick as well in a few small ways. And I think that's one of them. Like, it's certainly, like, it made for a fun scene, but it's not how it should have been handled.
Yeah, it's showing Hundert's weaknesses.
Yeah, he wants to, like, continue that relationship, partially because also, I don't think we've mentioned this, but Mr. Hundert, like Sedgwick, had a very well-known, very mentally powerful father that he never really connected with in the same way. Like, you even see when his friend gives him a copy of the book, it's like he's a little conflicted about it because he didn't have a great relationship with his dad. So he's trying to, provide also for Sedgwick what he didn't have.
Yeah. So we have him sort of in some ways rebelling, Mr. Hundert's rebelling against the system in some ways along with Sedgwick. But I think he might have also done some of those things because he thought it would be beneficial to the relationship that he was building.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. But
which is not a great strategy necessarily.
Yeah, bonding over breaking rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Which leads perfectly to what you're going to talk about with the final 4 having to be narrowed down to 3.
Yeah, basically, there's one test that one final test that determines who the top 3 are. And at first, he gives Sedgwick an A-. on it, and then he sort of rereads it and changes it to an A plus.
After he had done the
Yeah.
addition and saw that Sedgwick was 1 point short.
Yes, and Martin Blythe is the one that falls below, and I was just like, oh, why are you doing this? Why? Like, I mean, I don't think Sedgwick being in the competition wasn't necessary for his for to turn around his character.
Yeah, and we end up seeing that it doesn't, in fact. But uh, for just taking it back just a little bit, we hear from the beginning that Martin Blythe has a lot of expectations on him as well, because his father won the Mr. Julius Caesar competition. And he mentions multiple times, like, he even the last thing that his dad said to him before dropping him off was the winning answer for him, who invaded Rome in 102 BC. It was the Teutons and the Cimbri. Like, that was the last thing his dad said to him. So he feels the pressure to do well, and then to have tried so hard and to have deserved that spot and have it given away unknowingly. That was a crushing scene when he's just despondent under a tree and Mr. Hundert's walking by and realized that his decision wasn't just good for Sedgwick, it was crushing for another.
Yeah, Hundred had basically focused too much on one student uh,
Mhm.
to the detriment of others. And I mean, it's a really heartbreaking sort of scene. And it's almost frustrating that he just doesn't he doesn't do anything he doesn't do anything about it. Like, he doesn't, he theoretically could have said like, oh, the I made a mistake with my calculations.
Yeah, or it was a tie between them.
That would have been interesting too. Could a tie, I mean, we don't even know if a tie would have worked. Could there have
Yeah,
been 4?
yeah, I don't know, but I think also because he had already written the minus, he couldn't erase the minus, so he had to switch it to a
Oh.
plus.
Oh, that's, yeah, gosh. But yeah, I think he could have done them. I don't know. Who was checking up on the math? That's all I'm saying.
No, it's a fair question, but either way, like, it shows again, I think, just his willingness to compromise for the sake of what he thinks is good for Sedgwick, and then he has to bear the consequences later.
He's compromising his own virtue and, hurting um everyone else by not giving people their just rewards.
Yep, and we see this play out yet again during the Mr. Julius Caesar competition.
Yeah, do you want to
So,
talk about that?
yeah, so basically it's rounds of trivia. You have to answer correctly. If you don't, the next person gets the chance to. And first out is Jesse Eisenberg's character, and then it's Deepak, the Indian kid, and Sedgwick, and Mr. Hundert eventually realizes that they're in togas. Every time Sedgwick is going like this, he's actually looking at things that are taped to the inside of his toga. So he recognizes that he's cheating. And he goes to tell the headmaster, and the headmaster just says, ignore it. Like, don't call it out. And part of it is that the senator, uh, his Sedgwick's father, is there, and they don't want to publicly humiliate him. So rather than actually calling him out, he asks him a question. He kind of cheats in return. He asks him a question about somebody that was outside of what they were supposed to be studying for who Hamilcar Barca was.
Well, also, on that note, the reason he asked that question is because he knows that the Indian kid had been reading a book about Hamilcar Barca, so there was no doubt that he would have known. So basically, he knew that there was that the public option wasn't available to him because of the headmaster, at least maybe for his job. Maybe he was Hunder sacrificing his own virtue here for the because of the non-virtuous nature of the headmaster.
Mhm.
That's but anyways, he takes sort of a more clever route of giving people the at least giving um what's deep Maida
Yeah,
his
Deepak.
just to Deepak Maida his just reward of winning the competition because of to get around the cheating basically.
Yeah, and I do find it interesting, and we'll come back to this later as well. But the question he asks isn't about like a singular fact. He asks, "Who is Hamilcar Barca?" Just like in the beginning, is who is Shutruk Nahunte? It's always the
Mm.
question of who are you, and Sedgwick never gets it. Um, so, anyways, after this scene, he goes and confronts Sedgwick in his dormitory and says, that was an interesting performance. And Sedgwick's like, I know that you saw, and he pulls out the papers that he had glued to the inside of his toga, and he calls out Mr. Hunter on his hypocrisy. Like, well, the only reason you weren't willing to call me out was because my father was there. Like, where are your guts? Like, how are you different than anyone else? You're still playing the power and politics game.
And to some degree it's and he says that's false, but and Hunter to some degree when he says it's false it's true. It's just well it's true that he wasn't doing it because of his father. He was doing it because of the headmaster who was doing
Yeah.
it because of his father. So he was able to say no, but that was the forever the pretty much the end of the hope for rebuilding Sedgwick's character, at least by Hunter.
Yep. And you see just a brief montage of different pranks that
Yeah.
he pulled, and he said it
Uh,
was an avalanche of C's that with which he graduated. And then he also says that it was with profound sense of having failed Sedgwick that he gave him his diploma a few years later. Connor, are you there? Connor, can you hear me?
sorry about that.
It's all
Anyways,
right. Can you
yeah,
can you hear me?
Jeff, Jeff, can you continue the on what happens in between
Yep.
um
Yeah. So
that and the gap basically?
yep. So it kind of briefly goes over a series of 25 years in which Mr. Hundert is continuing to be the assistant headmaster, continuing to teach, falling in love, continuing to do his rowing in the morning, and eventually, when the headmaster dies, he thinks and knows that he's going to be the next person to take over, and he goes into the meeting and finds out that they've actually chosen to select Mr. Ellerby, who is basically his protege that we've seen throughout the movie. I mentioned before that his friend had given him a book. That was Mr. Ellerby. He had helped Mr. Ellerby get the job at St. Benedict's, and Mr. Ellerby's like first discussion with him after the Mr. Julius Caesar was about like, oh, we can turn this into a fundraising event. Like, so he's really much more modern, focused and focused on things that aren't just the development of students. he's looking elsewhere, and that's ultimately the reason that they give for why he's being chosen, is that attendance is down, we need to up our fundraising, and Mr. Ellerby is going to be the type of headmaster that can bring us into the future. And it's just really kind of interesting because that's also a very I'd say like a consequentialist decision. Like, it's not about, like, Mr. Hundert had earned that position, and he had shown that he would be good, and he was great at molding students, not just worldly considerations. And they're like, no, we're going to go with your protege, essentially. And the what I couldn't help but think of was kind of the comparison or the analogy with Julius Caesar being killed by his protege, Brutus. In the same way, Mr. Hundert ended up being stabbed in the back by his protege, because unbeknownst to him, Ellerby had actually submitted an application. It wasn't just that he had been approached about it. He actively sought it out without telling him. And again, it was a power play, and about consequences, not about what had actually been earned.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so he immediately tenders his resignation. Mr. Hundert does.
And they tell him that he's welcome back anytime.
Yep. So it's also interesting, then you see the effect that Mr. Hundert has. He basically loses his motivation in life. Like, he says, I've got so many things, I want to write a book. And then he sits down and has nothing to actually put on paper. And to me, it just kind of, it was almost like he became an empty nester, where he didn't have any children of his own, but the students had been like his children, and he had worked and molded them. And now he didn't have that purpose, and he was kind of lost adrift.
Mm-hmm. And he's eventually, for fundraising reasons, he is requested to do a follow-up, a rematch of Mr. Julius Caesar, the year that we were talking about, by a very now wealthy businessman, Sedgwick Bell.
Yep. Said that it would be the single largest donation in the school's history, enough for a 25,000 square foot addition. And it all came down to he wouldn't do it without Mr. Hundert. So, ironically, like you said, the one who couldn't do fundraising was now the linchpin for the biggest financial windfall for the school. And he had to go and redo the competition, like you said.
Yeah, and they do this at a club, and all the guys are brought back together. Do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, so you see Sedgwick doing like, with his family, he's kind of performatively going and studying, but he's really, more than anything, kind of trying to, in my opinion, overawe Mr. Hundert with his wealth and success. Putting him up at this nice place, big fruit basket when he gets there. And really, he had said early on, or like part of the proposal was he wanted to restore his intellectual integrity. So, anyways, you see the guys being guys. It's really kind of fun seeing the camaraderie. And to me, hilariously, Jesse Eisenberg's character as an adult was played, of all people, by Patrick Dempsey.
Yeah, it's really strange, because I really thought those actors should have, the actor for Sedgwick and Masudi, who's Jesse Eisenberg's character, the actors should have been swapped. I don't know if it's because Dempsey could actually sort of do sort of the mannerisms of Eisenberg, that's the reason he was that he did that role instead, because that's the only thing I can think of as an explanation. Dempsey's much more, I would say, handsome, and has more of the look of the kid who played
Sedgwick.
while the other guy, I just think it was a weird casting choice. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, and I think that it worked because, I again, spoiler alert, but um,
It's all
when
spoilers.
yeah, I know when we find out what has happened, it comes as even more of a shock. So I think that the character seemed like the actor who played the old Sedgwick seemed very like formal, very earnest, and like very dedicated to what he was doing. And so I don't think that Dempsey could have pulled that off as well as the actor who did play Sedgwick.
Okay.
So, real quick, before they actually get to the Mr. Julius Caesar rematch, there's a moment where Sedgwick comes in and he actually gives Hundert the book back that he had given him to inspire him to actually do well in at least the essay portion of the Mr. Julius Caesar, which I do want to point out also, like, there's no um, insinuation that he cheated at all on those essays. He actually did put the work in. And when Mr. Hundert asked why he had cheated back when he was a kid, he's like, well, why not? So you could tell that his father's request was actually listened to, but it wasn't by Hundert's choice. He learned the facts, but he wasn't molded by Mr. Hundert. But
He wasn't acting appropriately. He was just
yep,
able to improve his intellect.
Yep, exactly. So in the scene where he's giving the book back, he talks about his father and his father's last moments, and he said that he had never actually been heard by his father, and his father on his deathbed just looked at him and said, "Talk to me, just talk." He was so overwhelmed he didn't know what to say, and he finally, the moment he was about to start talking, his dad closed his eyes and died. And to me, that was a very tragic but very well done scene. I thought it was very telling.
Mm-hmm. Yep, definitely. Now,
Right.
he also, he meets a bunch of the different guys. One of Martin Blythe is at the forefront of that. He seems like a decent guy, but he seems maybe down. Like he seems like he's stayed like he doesn't have as much what's the word
Confidence.
Confidence, thank you.
And
yeah
I was just going to say, you see that even from the beginning. He's the one that was asked to read Shutruk Nahunte, the quote, and he was he was kind of stammering and unsure of how to pronounce things, and you see that like carry through his life.
Yeah, but his his teacher Hundert did not really give him the confidence. He did not help booster that at all.
No, absolutely. He talks about having failed Sedgwick, but he also failed Martin Blythe. And we'll get to that afterwards. So, anyways, they get to the Mr. Julius Caesar rematch. Patrick Dempsey misses the first question and he's out. And then again, it's back and forth between Deepak and Sedgwick. And again, we see Hundert finds out that Sedgwick is cheating again. He's got a graduate student in the back that's looking out of books and then speaking into an earbud. And so again, he's left with the option of publicly calling him out which may have resulted in the refusal to give the donation to the school. Or he again goes with the same type of question, but instead of asking who is Hamilcar Barca, he asks who is Shatruk Nahunte.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was everyone starts laughing like it was the plaque above the door.
Yeah, everyone knows, like, everyone who wasn't even a part of the had in the original competition had been, out for a long time. All of them knew, uh, and because he wasn't there for the first day, and because he didn't really understand the whole point of what he was being taught, he didn't care who Shudruk Nahunte was, because I mean, because history books don't write about him.
Yep, exactly, and that's why Mr. Hundred asked that questions because the grad student in the back wasn't going to be able to tell him a dang thing about Shushrik Nahunte.
Yeah, exactly. And he lost, and he did it graciously, at least for everybody else. And then he announces that he is going to run for senator.
Yep,
He
following in his father's footsteps yet
and he
again.
talks about principles and all that. And then afterwards in the bathroom, the Mr. Hundred is, sort of, and him meet in the bathroom, and they have a confrontation. And as you said, he said, Mr. Hundred basically says that he failed him, and basically the full Sedgwick comes out, the power hungry, the principleless, you know, full of pride, full of vice, is just
Yep.
out for success.
Yep. Mr. Hundred, when he's confronting him, is like, let me give you one last lesson. There's going to be a time when you have to look in the mirror and you'll be confronted with who you truly are. And yeah, exactly. You see Sedgwick coming out and like, who cares? Like,
Yeah.
who gives a spit? Like, he really just shows that he doesn't care at all what his character is. And then in
And
one of
yeah,
the best like record scratch moments, his son comes out from one of the stalls, and
yeah.
like, it's just perfect because it's in that moment, seconds after Mr. Hundred said it. He has to view himself through his son's eyes and realizes how much he just really screwed up.
Oh yeah, but and he doesn't even later you see that he's being interviewed he's doing interviews and stuff like that, and he hasn't changed one bit. And his kids, when Hundred meets his kids, I thought, there was hope because of the way his kids acted towards Mr. Hundred. They seemed fine, fine boys.
Yeah, that's true. And like they had to have some form of, they're still relatively young,
Mhm.
not even to middle school yet, probably, but very like there had to be some moral sense for him to have been that offended by what his dad had said.
Yeah, well, he also wanted, like, they want. I mean, it's very possible that Sedgwick has his um house ordered to some degree.
That's
Like
fair.
that. He might be out. It's kind of like how we talk about sometimes how uh the sort of the elite, they advocate things that they would never do. They
Yeah.
want other people to live a life that they would never live, but they think other people can because they're not worried about them, because
Mhm.
they're only doing things in pursuit of power. I think it could be very much like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyways, and then later, he talks to Martin Blythe. He tells him what he did, that he had changed the rankings, and that he should have been up on the stage, and he apologizes to him. And
Mhm.
Blythe says he doesn't know what to say. And what's strange to me is I think Hundred is the one that fails in his, he doesn't ask for forgiveness.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. He does at least recognize and own up to it, which is more than Sedgwick ever did, and we'll talk about this next time, but more than Mr. Uh, Keating
Eating.
did. But
Hmm.
he does at least apologize. But you're right; he should have actually asked for forgiveness from Martin.
Because like there's just it's just it should be a natural thing. It should be the like, the fact that Martin doesn't know what to say is very, telling, because there because it's not actually, like, I mean, he could forgive him. He could say, I forgive you, right away, but from a sort of link, from a human usual human expectation is that the person who is sorry wants the forgiveness, so they should ask for it.
Yep. Otherwise, it can just be almost like spitting out like, "Well, I'm sorry. I apologize." And, there's nothing for the other person to do. Whereas if you're asking for forgiveness, you're actually giving them the opportunity to deny
Yes.
forgiveness, which is how, like you said, that's how it should be. And that's something that actually, like, in our family we really try to instill is it's you don't just say you're sorry, you ask for forgiveness.
And then the person acquiesces.
Yep.
um, and yeah, no, it's just an interesting thing. And then he comes down later for like the dinner or lunch or
Or
whatever,
it was supposed to be a breakfast in his
breakfast,
honor.
and it's it's not there. uh,
Nobody's there.
it already happened, basically. And are we supposed to assume Sedgwick changed it to early and didn't uh
No,
tell him?
I think that they were just playing a prank on him.
But
Be
Sedgwick wasn't at it. He wasn't uh playing the prank with him.
Right, but my guess is so what happens is, he goes back to his room then after nobody is there, and all of the students minus Sedgwick are there to surprise him, throw a party there.
Was that at his room?
Yeah, he was coming
Okay.
back into his room, like, to pack up and head home,
Okay.
and so that's why I think it was, like, this maybe it wasn't maybe it was Sedgwick's idea, maybe it was just them deciding to have a little bit of fun with Mr. Hundert, but, like, instead of going there, they all went to the room just to surprise him.
Well, here's how I interpret it. I interpret it in a little different. I
Okay.
think Sedgwick, it changed the plan, did not tell Hunter.
Mm.
The good boys, the good guys, the good men, the ones that had appreciated his teaching, saw this and uh, did what they could to make a bad situation a good situation.
Yeah, that's certainly possible. I'm not they don't make it clear one way or the other.
Well, it's just because I don't think that because they say that it already happened. The breakfast already happened.
Yeah, and again, like that could have been, if that was planned from the beginning, wanted him to come out. They were going to tell him it had already happened so they could sneak into his room and then he'd come back. But it could be either way. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways, I just thought that was interesting that it's sort of left a little bit up to the imagination.
Yeah.
There. Anyways, and Martin Blythe is one of the ones that is there celebrating him. He doesn't seem to hold any grudge, uh, which
Yep.
he's more or less entitled to somewhat. Uh,
Yeah, he absolutely was. But I do think that I, one of the things that really struck me was like in the beginning, um, the very beginning of the movie is Mr. Hundert coming out for that weekend as an old man, and he's saying, at the book of my life is closed. Like, I've done what I'm going to do. I'm just a teacher. But then in this scene, he sees and kind of realizes that even though he's not going to go down in any history book as one of the great men, he has shaped in a good way some of the most important minds in the country, the leaders of industry, um, and leaders of academia, that people in real positions of power have been influenced by him and have actually taken some of his lessons to heart.
Yeah, no, definitely. And he's really learned that, his life mattered more or less, that his work mattered and that it wasn't all in vain.
Yep.
Just because he failed one student.
Yep. And
Uh,
then we see him, and he also didn't get the headmastership.
yeah, and
But
he does return to teaching,
yep.
which is
And
a bittersweet moment in my opinion. It's
how so?
a a few key changes in the school.
Yes, I do agree with that.
It's
It was,
become boys and girls, which I thought was just I just was so disappointed by that aspect of the ending. And also just I like it makes no sense that it would be like heavily diversified too.
yeah.
Like that makes zero sense. I thought this was supposed to be like a school for wealthy kids.
Yeah, so but when he goes through, there's Asian and black kids and
Well, there were just a
like
lot of
Hispanic, like
black girls, which I think
yeah.
doesn't make much sense demographically for this school, unless there's some big program. Which I mean, there might have been some big, but the whole point is that the character of the school has changed, and it just shows that in some ways, Hundert is a fossil basically.
Yeah, and that's also potentially just showing the impact of hiring Ellerby as the headmaster.
Oh, that too. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Ooh, yeah. Yeah. Anyways, I just thought that was such a bittersweet moment. I mean, the sweet moment is uh, a young Martin Blythe. His
His
Martin
son,
Blythe's son, who's also Martin Blythe, right?
yep.
Uh, he comes in and he has him read the Shudrak Nahunte plaque. Anyways, and I think it's telling that only one of the kids was sent to the school. Like, I was surprised that it wasn't just all the students should have been like the kids of that generation, because they theoretically most of them would have had kids around the same time.
Yeah, yeah, that's that's a very fair point.
Like they
Uh,
should have been more if they really valued their education, and maybe that's a statement about the fact that many of them don't value their education as much as they should for their kids. Um, they're not all, it's not all legacies.
yeah, yeah, that's a fair point.
Why only one? Why only one legacy? That just seems a bit strange.
My guess is they just wanted to put him in, contradistinction. Like it was a big deal that Martin Blythe Jr. was there, and Martin Blythe himself was there to drop him off, knowing he was going into Hundert's class.
Yeah, and they do have sort of a moment from the window and that sort of thing, and that's very sweet. Anyways, yeah. So, I mean,
Yeah,
yeah,
I also liked that his son had confidence. Like he walked in with
yeah.
not swagger, but he was confident in what he did. Like he wasn't stuttering over Shutruk Nahunte. He was mispronouncing some of the things, but he was confident in what he was saying.
Also, he was adorable too. I'll give him that.
Yeah, that's
Uh,
that's fair.
yeah. Anyways, so very very interesting movie. It's not like Hundert's a perfect teacher by any stretch of the imagination, but he had a overall good impact on his students,
Yeah,
and in sort of the good shepherd way, he went out of his way to try and pull back in his lost sheep.
yeah, yeah. I appreciate this movie also. Like you said, he's not perfect, and he sees the impact that his failures have had. like you can't go back and undo those mistakes. So it doesn't try to wash them over. He does have to face them, and he doesn't even do that perfectly. But he does, you know, go to Martin Blythe, and Martin Blythe does like the act of bringing his son to his classroom is, to me, like an act of forgiveness, basically.
Definitely. And also there is one other problem with this movie is that there's a lacking religious element to any of it. And it's just empty regarding that.
Yeah, I think that's also a very fair criticism, especially since it's Saint Benedict's school for boys.
Yeah, is it a Catholic school? Is it an like it is it an Episcopalian school? Like I don't know what it's
Yeah,
you wouldn't know based on any of the characteristics.
yeah, you. It's a very fair criticism.
Mm.
One thing I have one friend that I really enjoy getting to have movie nights with, and he does. He's an artist, so he really likes more esoteric movies. So when we watched this, he's like, I got what it was saying and I agreed with what it was saying, but I didn't really like it that much as a movie because it kind of spoon fed you everything, which I think it was interesting because he and I do have very different tastes in movies, but we're very similar. We're both going to the traditional Latin mass together, both young men with families. And you know, we have really good discussions about it. But he's much more the Terrence Malick type movie fan. So it was just interesting to me that, like, for me, this was one of my favorite movies. It still is, and I love that it's very clear with what it is trying to teach you. And I think it does it in a very good and very compelling way, but for him it just wasn't esoteric and, you know, artsy enough, essentially.
Interesting. Okay. Well, maybe he'll need to come on here at some point if he's willing to to tell us about artsy movies.
Oh, I guarantee you he would be happy to.
Well, Jeff, it's been a pleasure talking with you about this. I think it's kind of a perfect movie to start June with because it really is the opposite of Pride Month.
Yep, I
Though
absolutely agree.
really the answer isn't in the movie, which is the Sacred Heart.
Yes, well, at least it is in this show, right over your shoulder.
Yes, yes, exactly. You can find it here, but I just thought, it was just perfect timing for when the fact that we were going to be doing this today of all days.
Yeah, I agree. So I do have to ask, just overall, what would you like, what were your impressions, and, you know, do you recommend this movie or not?
Yeah, so my criticisms more fall under the fact that the time jump is a bit jarring.
Mhm.
I wasn't expecting it. I mean, it's an interesting uh, change from what I was expecting. It wasn't terrible because of that by any stretch of the imagination. I don't the characters of the 1970s are less enjoyable to me than characters of the 1950s kind of thing, like the
Yeah.
Dead Poet Societies, the 1950s. They're the type of interests and stuff like that is more wholesome, I guess, than the 1970s. Though I thought, and it was sad to watch sort of some of them be corrupted. I think we didn't get enough time, and we didn't get enough time with the boys. I guess that's
Yeah.
that's my big criticism. I think we needed more time with them.
Yeah, I feel like, you know, a 6 to 10 episode, like, mini series of this movie could be like really interesting to have it more stretched out and to see more of the corrupting influences and more of the back and forth between Hundert and Sedgwick.
Well, and even like some of like maybe examples of how the boys were in some sense decorrupted when by Sedgwick following the rules.
Yeah.
When he did follow the rules, we didn't really see sort of, they bring out sort of the porn and the Marxism and stuff like that, the rebellious stuff, but we don't see whether or not any of that was ever like pushed aside, or when it
Mhm.
was brought back, or if it was brought back. Like, I would assume it was at some point sort of brought back because of the way he turned out, but it just I don't know. It would have been interesting to see more of a, as you said, sort of um a, um a, a battle, more of like
Mhm.
sometimes Sedgwick is being pulled to the good side, sometimes he's being pulled to the bad, but and then it's like a flip of the coin of whether or not, when we get to the the future, how is he going to turn out, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. So, it sounds like overall you appreciated the message. Some of the movie could have been done better.
Yeah, it wasn't as good of a movie, like from an entertainment perspective, as like Dead Poet Society.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Um, but very well done, and Kevin Kline's great. And yeah,
He's great
I
in
think
everything he does.
I definitely would recommend just be careful about that. Those the basically two scenes that we mentioned. Don't
And
watch
they're
it with,
back to back.
more or less. They're, yeah. Anyways, it's just that's an unfortunate part of this movie, in my opinion. It really taints it a bit, at least for me.
Yeah, that's completely fair.
I would, it's a weird, in a weird way, with Dead Poet Society, there's suicide. That's less of a problem for me from a movie perspective than this problem.
Yeah.
Anyways, so that's my take. I recommend it if it sort of, it fits the qualities that the audience wants to watch. But it may not be for everyone.
All right.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll be, we talked a little bit about a comparison between the two movies, but we'll do a much more in-depth comparison, uh, um, you know, in like 2 weeks. So, thank you all for watching. I hope you have a good month of the Sacred Heart, and thank you, Jeff, for coming on and discussing this with me.
Happy to do it, Connor. Looking forward to our next discussion.
God bless everyone. Bye.